Hello, everyone, and welcome in. This is Aaron St. Dennis, the FF Mad Scientist, and welcome back to the Mad Science Lab podcast. We are continuing on today with Sleepers, Breakouts, and Busts, and here to help me with that is Jeremy Shulman. Jeremy, thanks for joining me. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Happy to be back again and get a chance to chop it up. It was fun last time. I think we did forget what we did, but I talked a heck of a lot about Calvin Ridley and, bit
Studs or
of
duds,
surprise.
maybe?
Yeah, studs or duds. That was it.
It seems
Yeah.
everyone talked about Calvin Ridley. I don't think I've had him in this one yet. Thank freaking God for that.
Well, spoiler alert, we're going to be talking a lot about Calvin Ridley again. So,
oh, Jesus. He's not even one of your players. How are you going to fit him into this conversation?
You're going to have to wait and see.
Oh, Jesus. Great. Before we get into Calvin Ridley Fest, you want to take a second to tell everyone where they can find you and your work?
Yeah, of course, man. Mostly at the League Winners, FF League Winners on Twitter. Also doing a bit of work for FF Face Off as well. Just writing constant articles, ramping up the work here, and just hoping to grow the content and, really just, talk fantasy, something I love to do, and more so on the Dynasty side at FF_Rebel on Twitter.
Sounds good. Well, I guess that means we can get right into it here. My computer will load. It did. Your first player is your sleeper. Oh, I don't like the way it put up his name. I wish I had noticed that earlier. Anyways, your sleeper is Baltimore rookie receiver Zay Flowers. I have his 2023 Fantasy Pros projections up. They have him as wide receiver 50, which seems pretty low. Negligible rushing stats projected. They project 50.2 receptions for 698.4 receiving yards and 4.3 receiving touchdowns. Why is Zay Flowers your sleeper?
Well, first of all, I think we have to acknowledge what we already know, that there's no wide receiver that's going to lead the team in targets and probably receptions for the Ravens this year. Mark Andrews is the undisputed number one leader in those categories. I really don't expect that to change, even with Todd Monken bringing his more pass-centric downfield game over as the new OC. But Zay Flowers has a real opportunity here, just given the state of Baltimore's roster, I think. Certainly, there are people who have their strong opinions one way or the other of Lamar Jackson and his ability to pass the ball. But if we kind of pump the brakes on that for a second and just look at who Zay Flowers is competing with, it's a potentially, although I hate to admit it because I love the player, potentially washed Odell Beckham Jr. It's a injury riddled at the moment Rashad Bateman. Who else are we looking at in this wide? Devin Duvernay. Nelson Aguilar. Who else are we looking at that's really going to compete with Zay Flowers for targets? And if we are, look, I don't like to think about projecting or assuming injury, but if this entire roster stays healthy, which I think is a long shot, we're looking at maybe Beckham, probably Bateman, maybe Isaiah Likely, as those competitors for the number two option in the passing game. And I think Zay really has, especially with no running back there to really soak up those check down targets. I really think Zay has a good opportunity to be the number two target.
Yeah, see, that's what it comes down to. You're right. It comes down to the options they do have seem to be just plagued by injury, whether it be Bateman or OBJ. The running backs are always plagued by injury, even Mark Andrews himself. For me, it comes down to whether or not you buy in on Lamar and whether or not you think this is just going to be a strictly run-first offense. But at wide receiver 50, I don't think you can really lose on making this bet. So it seems like a pretty solid bet to make. I'll bring up the, if I can click on the right button, there we go. Fantasy Pros ADP. He's currently wide receiver 52, 130th overall. You see Bateman two spots above him. This entire range here seems to be full of, some Hail Marys and dart throws, a couple of aging guys who are clinging to life. It's nothing really exciting here, so I don't mind Flowers in this range. What do you think of this spot in the draft and the range he's going in?
Yeah, I think other than Quentin Johnston, who has a real opportunity there in a still very crowded offense and pecking order in the wide receiver room and beyond in Los Angeles. I'm not really looking at anybody here that like does it for me, right? Alan
Yeah.
Lazard, or he might catch some balls in the end zone from Aaron Rodgers. Jameson Williams, I love, but didn't have a great first day of training camp yesterday, and certainly he's got the 6-game suspension. Juju, Myers, Mooney, fine. Sky Moore is a nice dart throw, but like you said, they're all dart throws in this range. Give me the guy on a great team with a defense that did struggle last year, even though it should be good again. And the option to be the number 2 target in an ascending offense that, look, they immediately lost their top 2 rushers last year, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So this is going to look completely different no matter how you slice it. I do believe in Lamar, as you mentioned, and they're calling this guy Joystick in practice, right? So
It's always good.
any guy with the nickname Joystick, sign me up, man.
Yeah, no, I like it. Like I said, I don't know if he gets there. I have a lot of him in Dynasty. I don't really have much of him in redraft, but he's free. So if he does hit, it's a free square. If he misses, you probably threw away a 10th or 12th round draft pick.
Very true.
We will move on to your breakout. And your breakout is Jacksonville quarterback Trevor Lawrence. Fantasy Pros has him projected to be QB 7, 4,085.7 passing yards, 26.6 TDs to go with 12.3 interceptions, 285.1 rushing yards to add in 3.9 rushing touchdowns. Why is Lawrence your breakout?
Well, I teased it before, so let's just rip the Band-Aid off and
This
talk a
is where
little
I
bit about
forgot. I
Calvin
see, and this
Ridley.
you threw me for a loop here because in my brain, Calvin Ridley is still on the Falcons, and I said, "How is he going to fit Calvin Ridley?" I forgot he's on the Jags, and that's how you're gonna make me talk about fucking Calvin Ridley. Damn it!
Well, look, let's get it out of the way, right? I don't see how Trevor Lawrence can only throw for 26 touchdowns when 15 of them are going to go to Calvin Ridley. All right.
Yeah.
Calvin Ridley is still, by all accounts, including some early video beat reporters. Look, it's hype season. I get it.
Yeah.
But Calvin Ridley is, by all accounts, still the same Calvin Ridley he's always been, who was the wide receiver 5 in fantasy points when he played a full season. Look, he's still in the prime of his career, maybe a little on the old side, sure, at 29, but he's a clear alpha to me, right? If we take everything that we love, and many of us in the industry love Christian Kirk and what he did last year, Evan Ingram and what he did last year, Zay Flowers and what he did last year, and we take all of that and now we just insert Calvin Ridley on top of that, we're pushing all of that fantasy goodness down. Yes, it elevates Ridley and maybe lessens those guys, but then the offense can be even more effective than it was last year. Second year of Doug Peterson, third year of Trevor Lawrence just ascending and kind of assuming that elite QB role. We all saw it last year. We all saw it immediately after Urban Meyer was jettisoned and Doug Peterson came to town. Their defense is terrible. They're going to have to throw the ball. Tank Bigsby I like, but I don't see him and Etienne commanding all of those RB targets there, or sorry, all of those rushes, right? So they're going to be a pass-first offense and the rushing component to his game. He ran for nearly 400 yards last year. He scored 5 TDs on the ground. That's just that extra added element to his game that can put him up in the top 5 QBs quite easily. assuming, as many of us are, that he's going to take that leap he does this year.
Yeah, right now he is QB8 on Fantasy Pros and ADP, going at 56 overall. I find I have a few more shares of him. I'm kind of all over the place in this, depending on where I draft. I've been going earlier QB than ever before because pretty much everyone has. I don't think if I have an early pick, depending on whether, super flex, if it's 1, 2, or 3, I have a fair share of all three: Mahomes,
Sure.
Allen, Hurts. Then when we get to tier 2, I see that as Burrow, Jackson, Fields, Herbert. All my shares are invested in Herbert and Burrow. I have very little Jackson or Fields. Then we get to this range here. I think this is kind of your tier 3. It's Lawrence, Watson, Dak, Tua. I find I have by far the most Lawrence out of the group, with probably Tua and Dak the lowest, or the next most, and Watson I have none of. So I like, if you miss on what I have as the top 2 tiers, 3 for some people, I definitely have Trevor Lawrence as kind of my break glass in case of emergency. He's probably the last one of these quarterbacks that I really want as my QB1. Like, I don't mind anyone who's 9 through as far down as 15. Like, if you told me my starter was Geno or Daniel Jones, it wouldn't be the worst. But Lawrence is kind of the last one where he's exciting to me as a quarterback, or as my QB1. And you kind of seen that in a lot of the Scott Fishbowl leagues. They went on a run of quarterback, and the second Lawrence went off the board as the 8th QB, it cooled off and people started to wait. So what do you think about his ranking and where he sits here in the ADP?
Yeah. I mean, if we're talking about dynasty, I absolutely see the case for Justin Fields, just from a fantasy perspective, over Lawrence. I
Yeah.
absolutely see the case for Justin Herbert. If we're talking about this season, I do like Herbert quite a bit, but I can see Lawrence easily jumping those two. Joe Burrow's already injured, right?
Yeah. Yes,
There's
he
a
is.
really good chance. Look, I'm not here to throw any shade on Joe Burrow, but there's a really good chance that he could flirt with top 5 value. But what I'm more concerned about is him continuing to progress. He threw for over 4,100 yards last year. And like I said, he ran for close to 400. So if he can push that up to 4,500 this year, if he can throw close to 30 TDs, which I believe he can, and if again, second year Doug Peterson, the running game is a bit more established, but certainly not the focal point. I see a huge year coming. And the other thing to consider is what Jacksonville did in the draft this year. They totally neglected their terrible defense, and instead they invested in a tackle in the first round, a tight end who has some decent blocking chops in the second, and an all-around RB in the third. So they clearly want to make the offense the focal point. They're clearly building around Trevor Lawrence, and by all accounts, they're doing it the right way.
Yeah, like I said, I have a ton of him. I'm really high on him this year. He's kind of the cheap version of the elite quarterback for me. Like I said, I have 8 as the elites, and he is by far the cheapest. I've even in the super flex, I have a lot of pairing him with it when I have a late pick and I can't get the top ones. I pair him a lot with this group here, where I have a lot of Lawrence with either Dak, Tua, Jones, or Geno, and I like that as my my 2 QB stack there. I don't. Yeah, I agree with everything you say. I think the sky's the limit. Like, I don't know if he has 5,000 yards in him or
Yeah.
league leading in touchdowns, but he might be able to push it pretty close, especially if Ridley is as good as he was. And a lot of people seem to think he is. I'm not a big Ridley fan, but they re-signed, or they extended Ingram. So he certainly has the weapons there to do it. That will transition us into a guy I'm normally the opposite on. Your bust is Vegas running back Josh Jacobs. Fantasy Pros has him as RB7, projected for 1,220 rushing yards and 9.7 touchdowns, 39.7 receptions, 291.2 through the air, with 0.8 receiving touchdowns. I know the running back landscape right now is kind of scary. You don't know if these guys are going to hold out or fake injuries or what the hell it is they're doing, but they're all over the place. These contracts are getting scary. What are your thoughts on why Jacobs is going to be a bust this year?
Yeah, this one was tough. I should, add a disclaimer at first by just saying I'm a noted RB hater. Running backs, in terms of
We all.
fantasy anyway. In terms of fantasy, I just, I want the cheap guys who are going to outproduce their value. Give me tight ends, wide receivers, and quarterbacks early. That said, Jacobs had a phenomenal year last year. He had over 2,000 all-purpose yards, right? He had a massive amount of touchdowns. His usage was just off the charts, and he by far had his best year of his career. We're all expecting him to do that again. And as you can tell with my Zay Flowers discussion, with my Trevor Lawrence discussion, I'm a huge situation guy. And the situation in Vegas is terrible. First of all, we have, let's forget about Jacobs and the holdout and the fact that he got on a plane and just left town, right? Let's talk
That's
about
always a
Josh.
good sign.
Let's talk about, look, let's see if we can get it on. I'm a New England Patriots fan, right?
Yeah.
And Josh McDaniels is, sadly, just a horrific head coach. I don't really know what it is. But everywhere he's gone, he's just left destruction in his wake, and he's doing it again here in Vegas. He's pushed Derek Carr and Darren Waller out of town. Devontae Adams has been rumored to want out, and that makes a ton of sense considering he went there to play with his college teammate and roommate in Carr, who's gone.
That was interesting.
It's ridiculous. He just doesn't seem to know how to handle the personalities on his team as a head coach for some reason. Many have pointed to the McDaniels-Brady relationship as being a contentious one, where Brady would just tell him at times to shut up, sit down, and he was going to run the offense the way that he wanted to run it, right? So that's certainly a concern. The Raiders defense is terrible, which is another concern, which should lead to more pass attempts, but pass attempts not from Derek Carr, who is capable, but from Jimmy Garoppolo, who is currently injured, and budget Derek Carr. Jimmy Garoppolo would hope,
that's
hopes
gross.
to be
Budget
Derek
Carr is nasty.
hopes to be Derek Carr for his career.
Christ.
So, yeah, there's just no way. Look, he's going to get fed. He's going to be a volume guy, but I just don't see any way that the Raiders are even a functional offensive team this season. And Josh Jacobs is going to suffer, and he's being drafted at a ceiling, in my opinion.
I think I've had this a few times where, not specifically with Jacobs, but where I've said these running backs that go anywhere from, I guess in Jacobs' case, he's going 16th overall, but it seems like once I get past the top, what's this, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Once it gets past Jonathan Taylor, I find I don't have any of these guys. Chubb, Jacobs, Henry, Pollard, Stevenson, all the way down to Hall. Mm-hmm. I think in drafts, maybe I'm like you. I'm not a big RB guy. I get the top 5, I'll take them. But after that, by round 2 and 3, I'm transitioning to wide receiver, and I don't think I have any shares of any of these guys. I just, it's the second and third tier of running backs. I could still have like really, really elite wide receivers. I could even sprinkle in like an Andrews or a high-end quarterback. I just don't have any of these guys. Chubb, Jacobs, Henry, Pollard, Stevenson, Hall. Mm-hmm. I don't like any of them. I think they're all being drafted at their ceiling. And I'm just passing, and I'm waiting for the later range here. Aaron Jones, Dobbins, Sanders, Akers, Rashad White,
Madison.
Now. Yeah. Oh, I'm not a Madison guy, but fair enough. What do you think of this range here? Where is he? Right there. RB7, 16 overall.
Yeah, I was just looking at the guys behind him, right? Derrick Henry, Tony Pollard, Ramondre Stevenson. Those 3 alone, there's no way I want Jacobs over them. And I think, like you said, I'll just pass on RB altogether. And I'll look at Andrews. I'll look at, in redraft, probably Wilson. I'm not sure exactly where the wide receiver tier is there, but that's very early. So you can get a top tier wide receiver there as well. But look, I get it. Jacobs caught, how many balls did he catch last year? I don't have that down in my notes.
I don't have it in front of me either, but it was a lot. It's less than, or it's more than it'll be this year.
Yeah. Absolutely. And look, I know Henry and Chubb aren't renowned pass catchers by any stretch, but
No,
certainly those guys are guaranteed to run for 1,500 yards. Whereas Josh Jacobs, I think, is just a product of, Derek Carr being better than he should be. And the fact that the Raiders were kind of in games. I just think they're just going to be blown out this year. Uh, Again, Jacobs hit his ceiling last year, and there's just no chance this team operates on a functional level. And Jacobs isn't in town again. So
yeah, that's going to be a dumpster fire.
yeah.
You don't even have to factor in the
Mhm.
don't even factor in that this offense is going to be a mess. So yeah, I'm going to be out at his current cost.
And will Adams still be on the team for the entire season? Will Jimmy G stay healthy? There's a lot of considerations here. Will McDaniels keep his job the whole year? I don't know.
Probably not.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that wraps up Sleepers, Breakouts, and Busts with Jeremy Shulman. You want to take another shot here to tell everyone where they can find you and your work?
Yeah, sure. At theleaguewinners.com, putting out regular articles, a senior writer over there, along with you, Aaron, and Prue.
And Prue.
We're doing some good work
Prue's
there.
next. Actually, when you're done, I have Prue in 9 minutes from now. So
Excellent. Nice.
yeah.
Well, he better not talk any smack about Calvin Ridley, that's for sure. But
I hope not. Given his 3 players, if he can fit Calvin Ridley into the discussion, I'm going to be impressed. So
you should challenge him to that.
no, I do not. I don't want him to do that. That's terrible.
But at FF Rebel on Twitter, and always around to chop it up, talk Dynasty especially, but redraft is I've been in this game for 15, 20 years, dating back to early college days. Just love the game and love talking about it. So yeah, happy to be on, and thanks again, Aaron.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you for joining me. So this has been Sleepers, Breakouts, and Busts with Jeremy Shulman of the League Winners. Once again, I am Aaron St. Dennis, the FF Mad Scientist, and this has been the Mad Science Lab podcast. Thanks again, Jeremy, for joining me, and thank you all for tuning in. Have a good night, everyone, and take care.